Okay, everyone, just want to quickly demo MySQL from the terminal really quick. And as you can see, I'm on one of our Ubuntu servers, and MySQL is not currently installed. So if you type MySQL, it's such a popular database that Ubuntu knows what you're talking about. So you can see here that it says to install it, apt-get MySQL client core 5-5. We don't want to type all that. We want to actually use the server meta installer. So if you type apt-get install MySQL server, this will install everything we need to run MySQL. Now, when this comes up, configuring MySQL server 5.5, you want to make sure you remember this password you set, because this is setting the root user for MySQL, and you need to be able to get in here. So don't forget this. It'll make you type it twice. So make it something you can remember. And once you do that, MySQL will go through and install the rest of the packages, including the MySQL core, the client, and the server. So you'll have everything you need to get things running on this server. So it should only just take another second here to completely get set up, and then we'll be able to get in and actually start looking at what's going on MySQL, and we'll kind of show you what a basic install looks like. Okay, so there we go. All done. And now when we type MySQL, if we do MySQL-V, oops, there we go. We can see what version and distribution we're using. So we know it's installed now. So to get into MySQL, we want to use the MySQL command. We want to use the flag U and type root, and then give it the flag P to type in our password. And when we do that, it'll ask us for our password, and we want to enter the password for root, because that's the user we are trying to log in as. So I'll enter my root password. And if everything works out, you should get a new prompt that looks like this. And this is your MySQL prompt. And now we can start running queries. So the first query we should run is show databases. And you don't have to type show in all caps. You can just type it in lowercase as well. But you'll oftentimes see the actual MySQL primary commands typed in all caps. Just helps readability and helps you distinguish it from other things. So here you can see we have a couple of different databases. We have MySQL performance schema test. Information schema and performance schema are going to be your default databases. They're there for the system, as well as MySQL that holds all the user information in MySQL. So MySQL actually uses itself to store information about the database, like users and permissions and things like that. So it kind of eats its own dog food per se. So let's use the test database, and we'll explore that a little bit. So if we type use test, now notice I'm also finishing each line with a semicolon. You have to terminate your SQL statements with a semicolon. If you don't, well, that was a bad example. So it's adding it for you now. Most of the time you have to use the semicolon, particularly with SQL statements, or MySQL will just run to a new line expecting you to add another line of SQL. So if you're done with your command, make sure you use a semicolon, and it should give you the desired result. So now that we're using the test database, we can type show tables and see what we're working with. And there are absolutely no tables in this particular database. So let's use MySQL and go show tables. Okay, so now there's 24 rows here, and we can use a simple select statement. So here I'll just do select star. So I want to see all the rows from our user table. So select star from user. We'll just end it like that. Okay, so this is really difficult to read because there's actually a lot of rows in this. So let's go back up to the very top and see what our column headings are. So we have host and user. So why don't we just do, instead of all rows, we can do select user from, I think the table was called user. Okay. There we go. So now we can see all the users that are currently installed. You could also do select user and host from user, and then we'll get all the hosts. We could also do select user host from user where host equals localhost. There we go. Now we're seeing all our users that have localhost privileges. So these are just some basic MySQL commands. We won't be doing too much actual MySQL and worrying about joins and things like that. I've provided some additional reading below if you're interested in learning more about that. Once we start using WordPress and setting up that, we will typically only deal with our database at kind of the application level. So we just need to make sure it's set up properly, the users are set up properly, and the database is set up properly. And then from there on, typically our applications will make these modifications on their own. But it's also good to know how to do this in case you ever need to query the database for something that's not in your app. And it's generally a good idea to know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So when you're done using MySQL from this terminal, you can just type exit, and it will take you back out to your standard Linux, command shell. So that's pretty much as easy as it is to get MySQL up and running on your Ubuntu machine. And really that's all we'll need to do when we start to get into WordPress, and we'll start moving into that next week. So this was the MySQL demo, and I will see you guys in the next video.